Hello and welcome to our last alumni podcast for this year. Alumna Dr. Amanda Odoi from Ghana tackles gender-based violence from different perspectives. She believes that men need to be fully engaged and fully involved to end the violence against women and girls. But Amanda wears many hats. She's a feminist, gender and social justice advocate, and a research fellow at the Center for Gender Research, Advocacy and Documentation, or CGRAD, at the University of Cape Coast. Amongst others, Amanda holds a PhD in development studies and a master's degree in sociology from the University of Cape Coast. She's an alum of the Australia Awards Fellowship Program at Flinders University. Amanda was also involved at the African Studies Center of the University of Leiden in the Netherlands and was a postdoctoral research fellow at Western University in London, Ontario in Canada. She's currently a postdoctoral fellow at the Lund University Center for Sustainable Studies in Sweden. Her research interests are masculinities, sexualities and gender-based violence, as well as climate change and gender. So today we want to explore her insights and research in these areas. So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you very much, DC.
Amanda, you've been working on issues of gender equality and gender-based violence for some years now. So how did you first become interested in gender inclusive development and gender studies?
Thank you. My interest in gender-based violence started as a graduate student in 2008. I was working as a teaching assistant who was sort of assisting a professor that was teaching gender-based violence. And while sitting in the class, the issues that came up, how women experience violence and how they play out in different spaces, I realized it's something I could relate to growing up in a society where I see different women experiencing different forms of violence. But I guess before that class, I didn't have a name that I could put to that experience. So hearing that and finding out how I can also contribute to addressing such issues, especially through an academic space, I decided to develop more interest. And so I decided to, as my graduate thesis, look at marital rape as a form of gender-based violence, because around that time it was also very topical in Ghana, and people did not really acknowledge that as a form of gender-based violence. So I thought interrogating that, finding the reasons behind that would be interesting and also to raise awareness. So that's how my journey with gender-based violence started as an academic interest before I moved to the activism spaces as well.
Amanda, you've argued in one of your articles that culture is the main contributing factor to the persistency of violence. And you've also talked about how culture persistently creates the gendered nature of violence. Can you share some of your insights with us, as well as your research findings around this?
Yeah, so as I mentioned about my thesis and the findings that I came across, also is the understanding when you're in a class learning, we talk about spaces where we learn about these things. And key amongst all the issues that come up is the culture within which we are socialized and how we grow up. It defines what roles women are supposed to play, what roles men are supposed to play. We think that is also the expectation of what a man can do to a woman or what a woman can accept in relationships and in our everyday life. So from my thesis and my interviews and work over time, you ask people, why do men think that they can do what they do to the women? They tell you it's because that's how we've been socialized. This is a woman's place, this is a man's place. And some of the key languages, which is discourses that I looked at in my PhD thesis around men, masculinity, and gender-based violence, the fact that a man is supposed to or is entitled to discipline a woman. And to what extent do we define discipline in our culture, the extent to which men can perpetuate it? These are some of the things you find in a research finding. Not only are men socialized to understand that they can do this to women, it's also the socialization that makes women accept these forms of abuses and violences. Oh, I'm a woman, my husband can do this. So it is how society, the language, the culture we're finding and what our expectations are define the relationships and define what can be done to other people. It is within that we frame, or I frame this argument that culture is a very foundation that allows gender violence perpetration to exist and also sustained over the years. Because it's the very argument people make. And when we talk about culture, it is not just about the traditional culture expectations, but then culture around religion, religious expectation, religious languages. As far as we go, so which religion do you belong to? How does it position men and men within the spaces and the language around it? How have people come to accept the norms and practices in the various spaces that we engage in? And these are the very foundation, because they are also the agents of socialization and the spaces who we have become over the years. Because then we have the political culture, we have the national culture. What are the laws that prohibit gender-based violence, or the absence of it that makes it sustained over the years? Because there are some people that will be perpetrating violence against women. When they move to a Western country where there are laws and norms that says this is not tolerated, they will not do it because they know there'll be sanctions for it. So the absence of the sanctions in a particular space and in the cultural terrain are some of the reasons why gender perpetrating and acceptance over the years has grown. Yeah. And therefore, so my argument is that if we want to be able to address it, then there is a need to be able to address these norms, languages around what is expected and what's tolerated or not.